This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 342 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Busko, and today we will talk about Dortmund's rebound in the Champions League, and we will preview the upcoming Bundesliga match against promoted side Arminia Bielefeld. For all that and more joins me Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm fine, how are you?
I am doing very well myself. If there are some background noises, I apologize. My neighbor apparently is sawing in the garage that's right next to the cellar where I'm sitting right now, or basement as we say in the United States. Anyway, since we don't have much housekeeping to do today, Lars, I guess it's time to dive right into the 2-0 win against Zenit on Wednesday evening. A game very much to my liking, I will say, but I've heard people label it boring. How did that happen, Lars?
I'm actually a bit flabbergasted that you would say that this game was to your liking, because it was quite boring. I mean, the only saving grace for you is you didn't have to endure it after a long day of work starting at 9 p.m. because obviously you are in another time zone. But for me, having been up since 5 a.m. in the morning, the first 45 minutes seemed okay, but especially the second half, that was it was hard to keep the eyes open for some of that game. But I mean, ultimately, I would say I agree with the analysis of most players, which is they had to win the game. They did enough to do that, and you know that's basically it. I mean, 3 points, and nobody will ask you like tomorrow how the game against Zenit went. Also, because there was not really too much memorable stuff going down.
No, not really, to be honest. So Favre stuck with his 4-2-3-1 again. This time it was Reus in the number 10 instead of Julian Brandt, and Dahoud did make the cut, but Delaney did not. For him, Axel Witsel played. Were you okay with the lineup choices?
Yeah, I mean, delighted to see Dahoud get an extended run. I think he has a case to be one of the most improved players in this Dortmund side over the last few weeks and months even. I think I've given him the moniker of lockdown Iniesta because, quite frankly, he's looked quite different as a player since the Bundesliga's restart in May. And it's certainly encouraging to see that he's also conserved that good spell of form over an injury. Remember that he missed most of the summer and early season this year after suffering an injury late last season. So it's always nice to see him flourish, because we all know how talented a player is in there, and then that has at times found it difficult to bring that out onto the pitch. So it's nice to see Favre give him more confidence, and I think he repaid it once again with a decent, or even a good performance, I would say. And other than that, I was perhaps a bit surprised about the lack of rotation, but I think this was maybe down to the fact that they were already behind the curve, if you like, in the Champions League, and have a quote-unquote winnable fixture against Arminia Bielefeld coming up. So I think the onus was really on getting those 3 points, and maybe we will see more rotation against Bielefeld on Saturday.
Yeah, I would assume the same thing. I think the very first thing that I thought when I saw the lineup was it's probably going to be very clogged up in the middle for Dortmund. And if, you know, according at least to the press conference, because journalists asked Favre, and Favre did answer accordingly, is that he tried to have Gio Reyna and Sancho play more on the wings, but they were drifting to the inside as well, which is kind of predictable, but also meant that Dortmund lacked a little bit of width. So yeah, I don't know if that's the reason though why it took so long to create high caliber chances. I mean, I think in the first half there were a couple. I don't know. Erling Haaland had a good shot, and I think Royce or so was at the end of a shot which went wide. I think there was a free kick, and did Dahoud not have a shot, or was it in the second half? But either way, it's not like Dortmund created as many chances as they might have. I think that's something we've criticized before, because there seems to be a lack of impetus at the beginning of a half, and I don't know if it's coincidental or more of a correlation that Dortmund so far have not scored a single goal in the first half this season, which is kind of weird because Dortmund usually like to score early. But not so.
If we're not counting the cup, I think they were two goals up within 30 or so minutes at Duisburg. Yeah, I mean, it's still a competitive fixture.
Yeah, so. Yeah, you're right. But other than the cup, then. But yeah, no, worth pointing that out. But yeah, still kind of a little weird. So yeah, also I have to say I do expect a little bit more of Marco Reus. I thought he went AWOL for a lot, considering A, his talent, his capabilities, and B, that he's playing on the number 10 role, which is usually a very flashy role, or a player that is very involved in the play. But I don't know if it's just me and me not really identifying it. But it seemed like the game was drifting away from him. He was never really that involved, and I don't know, not making the runs that you would expect from a player in this position, and especially for Marco Reus, who is famously a vertical player. I think either before or after the game, Didi Hamann on Sky was sort of slating him for not being the right captain or something. There was a discussion going on, which I couldn't pay too close attention because it just absolutely bores me, Lars. However, I think it is justified a little bit that we chat a little bit about Reus's overall form right now. I mean, he's still sort of coming back from injury, but even before his injury, it's not like his performances were on the absolute highest levels. So what are we making of the Dortmund captain? Yeah, being just one of many instead of being an outstanding player, which he arguably could be or should be.
Yeah, I think it's always a bit difficult with Reus, just because there's a lot of expectation on his shoulders, just because of the fact that he is so talented and has been so prolific in front of goal. For an attacking player that isn't a striker, I think he has very favorable numbers in comparison to other great attacking players over the last decade and a half or whatever. So it's always, you expect more from Reus than you do from other players, which is fair enough, but he's now 31 years old, and me being the same age, I can tell you that some things aren't as easy as they were 5 years ago, and I'm sure it's more apparent for a professional athlete in comparison to myself. He's also been injured so often.
Well, to be fair, Marco Reus has never shaved, and this is all the facial hair he has.
Being facial hair challenged myself, I don't appreciate that comment. I think injuries do take their toll. He has lost certainly a step or two. His explosiveness isn't really there. I mean, remember the times when he was a wide forward drifting inwards? I think that those days are long gone. I think he's more of a central player now. He wants to play there, obviously, but also it's basically what his profile dictates. And I just think, as you said, because Reina and Sancho were basically playing like a double 10, in addition to Marco Reus, the actual 10, there was just a clutter of personnel in the center too often, and he failed to make an impact partly because of that. I think he didn't really have as many opportunities because Sancho is obviously very dominant on the ball. Has a lot of touches around the box, especially when he drifts inside. So I think basically what I'm always saying is Reus's best position isn't actually as a 10, it's as a secondary striker, playing behind or around, in this case, Erling Haaland. And ultimately, I think his best role for this team right now, if we are looking at, overall squad planning and whatever, would probably be as like Haaland's backup / spot starter in attack, as opposed to taking away a starting spot from either Sancho, Reina, Hazard, or even Brandt. I mean, obviously, whenever Reus is on form, he's arguably still one of their best attacking players and definitely warrants a starting spot. But especially now that he's still coming back to form, and we all know how frail that always is because the next injury is sadly never too far away with him, I think it would make sense. And kind of Favre kind of sees it the same, because obviously he's not playing Reus every game. He didn't start, for example, in the Revier Derby, which, is despite Schalke's problems, is still a big fixture where usually would say Reus not only being the captain, but also being, one of the potentially best players on the team would usually start. He got a rest there. He's been rested before. Don't necessarily think he'll start against Bielefeld with the next Champions League game coming up. So they kind of see it the way we've described it, with Reus not being at his highest peak at the moment, and thus other options deserving their time in the spotlight as well.
Yeah, and another point I would like to make, due to Marco Reus not having played much of the second half of last season, and being out injured for such a long time, he also hasn't had too many minutes together with Haaland. I mean, they did combine for the 1-0 against Hoffenheim, but I think especially against Zenit, you could see that they are actually very similar in terms of how they construct their runs, and it happened a couple of times too often that they were sort of making the same run and occupying the same space, which is a little unfortunate. What also just shows that, I like to talk about the automatism, obviously, but in this case, just, they need to sort of work together a little bit better as a striker do, if you will, if you have him more as a false nine, or if whatever, playing off the shoulder of Haaland. I think that obviously also plays a role. But nevertheless, the expectations are high, and obviously you need to justify being played as a number 10 because there are a lot of capable other players. And right now, I would actually make the case for maybe Julian Brandt playing there over Reus. I think you just made the same point. So, it's obviously sort of a luxury problem, as we would call it in German. Marco Reus needs to improve a little more. I assume if he can stay injury-free and the season progressive, this is something that would probably take care of itself. Let's talk about the probably biggest positive coming out of this game is that Dortmund managed to not allow a single shot on target. They basically are doing the same thing for 180 minutes now, if you combine that with the Revier Derby, since Schalke also did not manage that. I think that by itself is probably and arguably a very positive development. When we talk about a mature Champions League performance, and this is why I said it's very much to my liking, because Dortmund pretty much controlled the game for 90 minutes. Obviously, they need a little bit of luck to score a goal. That penalty that was caused in the 77th minute or so was maybe not the smartest way by Zenit, but apart from that, the defensive performance I really liked, especially since there was a switch to the back four, and Dortmund have looked sometimes a little foolish in that system. And obviously also coincides with the return of Manuel Akanji, who I thought had now two very strong outings. Lars, would you agree with me in at least that analysis that from the defensive standpoint, in terms of how you anticipate balls and how you close down opponents, this was pretty good?
Yeah, But just like Saturday, they played against an opponent that had no ambition to play forward. I mean, obviously, when you have so much possession and push quite far up the pitch, you need good, what we call in Germany, Restverteidigung, and also with the few balls that come your way, Endverteidigung, and both of those things were really good. I think Akanji and Hummels both had strong games. I would actually say that Hummels was perhaps the best player on the pitch outside of probably Dahoud. So certainly in that sense, you can make the case that they were very solid again, but they didn't have anything to do. And I think
but that being said,
this back four has not been tested so far, and I think I'd be a bit weary of putting them in can yet, as Bill Parcells would say. I mean, they haven't really played anyone of note in these last 180 minutes. I mean, Zenit came with Artem Djuba, who scored 3 goals in the World Cup 2 years ago. But he was flopping around like an NBA center, despite his size advantage, even against Hummels. I mean, he looked twice as big as Marco Reus for the coin toss. So, but he didn't do anything, and he was complaining all the time. He was on the floor.
Are you calling him an oversized Pulisic?
I was just going to say that he was on the floor more than Gio Reyna is usually, but I mean, Pulisic also works. We have to play to our American audience, obviously.
Obviously.
I mean, if this back four Bielefeld, I like their playing style. Actually, I think they were arguably the not inarguably, I would say, the best side in the second division last season, but they don't have necessarily great individual talent. I haven't seen Club Brugge in these Champions League games because it's so late that after the final whistle I basically fall asleep on the couch. So I would assume that Bayern ahead of the international break is the first real test, or maybe the second, depending on Bruges. So encouraging signs, but always with the caveat of opposition that didn't really put any pressure on them.
Yeah, that's probably fair enough, but I do remember too many games where that was sort of the case and Dortmund still invited them. So at least... I
mean, they even did against Zenit. It was just testing Roman Bürki's quality or lack thereof with the feet and even his head on the goal line, which would have been one of the absolutely most remarkable own goals in Champions League history, I'm sure.
Yeah, was it a back pass from Akanji?
I want to say it was Guerrero.
Yes, it was a super awkward bounce. I thought it was going to go in.
Yeah, and I was basically expecting goal line technology to give us a shot of how close it actually was, because I don't think it was too far away from the goal line actually.
No,
and obviously Bürki then hoofed the ball higher than long, if that makes sense. So the ball was still around the 6-yard box. So all in all, it kind of Roman Weidenfeller against Legia Warsaw like instant.
Yeah, well, it was kind of hilarious, and the thing is, the way Dortmund played, you also knew that if they concede a silly goal, which is never too far out of the realm of possibility, if that is the case, then I don't think Dortmund win this one. I think they would actually lose 1-0. I don't think that Dortmund then have the infamous proverbial switch where then they all of a sudden find a way to attack more, especially when Zenit then probably will defend even more if that's possible. But yeah, I think in the end it was very positive for them that they more or less shut down Zenit minus that one faux pas and grabbed the 2 goals. Also nice for Bellingham to get his first assist. So overall a positive night. It's a game that I really like because I don't need all this drama when you have a million midweeks fixture. I think a professional performance and a professional result is exactly what the doctor orders. You don't have any injuries as far as I can tell. So in that regard, it's all very positive. Whether it's entertaining for the average fan or for neutrals, I think is rather secondary at this point of the season, to be honest. So it's just for Dortmund very important that they win all their home games in the Champions League. And even though if it was not the nicest game, was not super easy on the eyes, but well done. I mean, Jadon Sancho then put away the penalty in the 78th minute, which obviously was a deserved penalty, even though it was the foul was not very smart, but these happen, and especially usually is how Bayern players often win penalties, that someone just for some reason grabs them stupidly and puts them to the ground. This time it was Hazard, and Haaland then finishing his goal. It's pretty good too. Lars, I think we can knock it on the head as it pertains the Zenit discussion, and can move over now to the game against Bielefeld, which is on Saturday, the afternoon kickoff. I think it's a 10:30 kickoff Eastern time in the United States, because Germany have already moved their clocks to normal time, and the United States do that on Halloween, I think. So that means we're only 5 hours apart at this very moment. I have honestly not seen much of Bielefeld yet this season. Have you?
No, but I did watch them quite a few times in the second division. As I said earlier, in my opinion, clearly the best and most solid, most convincing team to play in the second division last season, which is obviously saying a bit, because Stuttgart have this great collection of talent and have had a decent start to the season. I think they're 5th or 6th in the championship after 5 games, which isn't saying too much, but still a good start for Stuttgart. And Bielefeld definitely outclassed them last season, and I think they went ahead in the table, to the top of the table in somewhere in autumn, and they never looked back. Basically, their promotion was almost guaranteed even before Bundesliga shut down in March. So there's a lot to like about them as a team. I just don't know how much their lack of individual quality will come back to haunt them in the Bundesliga, because obviously games they dominated last season, they will now be the underdog and need from time to time a player to provide the goods. And their talismanic striker Fabian Klos, for example, I don't think he has scored this season. So I think this is one of those cases where they were clearly too good for the second division last season, but are probably not going to be good enough for the first division. But still, it's nice for guys our age, I think, to have Bielefeld back in the Bundesliga, because that's bringing back some memories from our childhood when things were easier and Bielefeld were a mainstay in the first division, just like, for example, Bochum were back in the day.
Yeah, but probably mostly nightmares for Dortmund fans, because I don't think Dortmund's record at Bielefeld is so great. I know we looked at it pre-pod a little. I don't know if you want to expand on that or not, but Dortmund's visits to the Alm, as the stadium is called, the Bielefelder Alm, isn't all that prolific.
No, I think they had like 3 Bundesliga wins or something like that, one of which precedes, I think, even Matthias, early 70s. I mean, obviously, these records never say much, and definitely don't when the last meeting was something like 11 years ago. But still, I mean, there's something to be said about, an old school, smaller stadium on the smaller side where people are quite close. But obviously, there are no people in the stadium on Saturday. I think Samir Arabi, the sporting director of Bielefeld, has already come out and said that basically the lack of support is they're one of the teams that he predicts will suffer the most, which I guess most people will say it because it's also kind of appeasing the fans a bit if you say that you desperately need them. But I think it's definitely true for a side like Bielefeld that doesn't have the individual talent and such needs, all the things to go their way as much as they can. And obviously with no fans for the foreseeable future, at least November. But yeah, I mean, we can all read the stats. I think it doesn't look great for the return of fans anytime soon in Germany. That's certainly, I guess, a break for Dortmund in this case, but I don't think anybody wants to consider the lack of fans a break for anyone.
Yeah, no, really not. It's not great. But yeah, this is a classic trap game for Dortmund, I think, where they can beat themselves, like they did on trips to, I don't know, Paderborn or other teams like Darmstadt, for example. This is sort of the game where everyone expects Dortmund to grab the 3 points, in their sleep, basically, and then they get found out because sometimes this team is a little arrogant. There's no other way to put it. Also, Bielefeld, I would say, at least from what I've seen so far in the Bundesliga and what I've seen before in the second division, they are a team that can beat the pressing, which is obviously unfortunate because Dortmund don't press that much. But, they can retain the ball when they win it far back in their own half, which helps them sometimes to, evade some pressure and take the pressure out of the game. And, they're not the classic team that just punts the ball forward and prays, since a little prayer with the ball, basically. But they do have some nice, I would say on the ground combination game going for them. I would say the last pass isn't all that great. Usually it's where their downfall is, but they can score on a free ball, obviously, especially if your backline is unorganized. And yeah, otherwise, I mean, they're in 14th place. They have scored 4 goals so far. It all needs to be read in this context. Obviously, they are a promoted team with not the resources that you usually would have for the first division, especially to establish yourself. Obviously, they could still make it for some reason. For example, Schalke is just staying as poor as they are, and then Mainz, staying terrible, and who knows what Cologne are doing, but otherwise this is probably going to be a relegation battle, and fans from Bielefeld probably know that and just try to enjoy the season as much as they can, which is obviously a bit harder now, considering that due to the rises in COVID cases, fans are once again completely banned from football stadiums in Germany until further notice. So yeah, I don't know what to expect of this. Lars, you, in the context of the Zenit game, said you would have usually expected a little bit more rotations. So now that Dortmund do play Bielefeld, how do you expect Favre to pick his team according to who might need a rest?
The good thing nowadays is that they have a lot of data on this stuff, so they basically can usually tell when a player is very low on energy. I think it's difficult to gauge, from just watching these games. I don't know what they can exactly do in terms of regeneration during the week. Obviously, they don't really get to practice actual stuff on the pitch with these midweek fixtures all the time. So I would assume that players who've played a lot of games recently are being looked at. I think Thomas Meunier, he's been basically playing non-stop since coming back from his injury in, I think it was preseason, or maybe was it during the Duisburg game or whatever. So would not be surprised if Matteo Morey got his first start of the season. He's been on the bench a couple of times now, should be ready to go. Felix Passlack might play either for Meunier or for Guerrero, who's also played quite a bit recently. When
are you going to give Hummels a rest?
How are they going to do that with no other center backs available? I mean, Emre Can is still out with in quarantine, I would assume. I mean, I haven't really heard anything to the contrary, and would not assume that he can provide enough negative tests, plus make the matchday squad based on fitness after however many days out. obviously Zagadou is still not back, even though
So
I think
the rest for
Michael
Hummels will
Zorc-
be the international break, and then hoping that after the international break, Zagadou is back.
Yeah, and also I don't know how much rest a center back really needs. I mean, Hummels being the most experienced and decorated player on this team, I would assume can basically pick his spots himself. If he told Favre I need a rest, he would get it. But, I think he's so experienced that he knows, also during games. I mean, for example, this game against Zenit, I don't know how much of a toll that actually takes on a center back. I mean, in the first half, he had a couple of spicy duels with Juba, as we said earlier, but he also won all of them decisively. So I don't know. I don't think necessarily that someone like Hummels desperately needs a break on the regular. So
Fair
I
enough.
would be more inclined to see more rotation, obviously up front, because it's always easier to just mix and match there. Hazard should be good to go after playing, what was it, like 30 minutes or so against Zenit. I'm assuming we at some point will see Renier get a game from the start, just because, he hasn't really been able to show anything in these cameo appearances. And they have him for 2 years, so obviously they can be patient, but he's a fresh body with enough talent to sign for Real Madrid on a 30 million transfer. So even if he hasn't really done much to warrant recognition in a Dortmund shirt so far, there's still obviously talent there that needs to be nurtured. So I wouldn't be surprised necessarily to see him get a bigger run. I don't know that he's necessarily going to start this game. And other than that, I mean, they have so many options basically in every position outside of defense, I would say. So, every combination is kind of thinkable and wouldn't necessarily surprise me.
Yeah, I guess you're right in that regard. It's I don't know if you want to give Haaland a rest again, considering after that I think Dortmund play against Bruges, right, and then Bayern. Is that the way it goes? And then there's the next international break upcoming.
Yep.
So if you want to give Haaland a rest, this is probably the best chance to do it. And then, I don't know, bring him on for 20 minutes if needed. Otherwise, he can take a full game rest for all I care and just save it for the next games. Otherwise, I don't have too many other things to say other than that I really hope that Dortmund are a little bit smarter this time than they were against Augsburg, and maybe do try to decide this game early on and not, try to, pass the ball around themselves for 45 minutes and then after the break, I don't know, get sucker punched or whatever. That's pretty much my 2 cents on this game. Who we obviously see in the Arminia backline is Amos Pieper, who used to play for Dortmund's second team, I think, right? And was he playing for the under-19 as well?
Yep. I think he actually scored the winning penalty in the under-19 championship final against Bayern, which you saw sitting like 2 meters from Hans-Joachim Watzke, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, maybe. Was it against FC Bayern or was it against 1860? I can't even remember that. Everything is a blur.
What was the record champions, FC Bayern?
Yeah, all right. Fair enough. Yeah, he is now, I think, 22 years old. It's going to turn 23 next year, I think. So,
and he's really good, by the way. I mean, he's one of those players that, even if Bielefeld get relegated, will definitely attract Bundesliga attention. He's also playing well whenever called upon in the under-21 team, which is obviously still going, unlike most youth national teams, which, because of the COVID situation, have basically been called off for, I think, the rest of the year. But, Pieper definitely... I think there's also already talk among fans who know, Bielefeld better, that he might be a guy that could come back to Dortmund, actually, which is always an interesting idea to get more locals into the club, because that's always something that a lot of fans can identify with. And, being a young center back from Germany, that could be an avenue for both sides that might be worth entertaining.
Yeah, let's just hope he would not turn into the next Leonardo Balerdi then, but that's very unlikely since he's already playing in the Bundesliga as an established player. And yeah, who knows? I'm certainly going to look out for him when Dortmund play. I was also hoping to see Arne Meyer, who I think joined Bielefeld from Hertha Berlin, who I rate sort of, but I think he is still out injured. So yeah, that's kind of too bad. But yeah, I mean, maybe Fabian Klos, their striker. I don't know if he's related to Dortmund legend Stefan Klos. But yeah, who knows if Dortmund are the slump buster. But so far, Fabian Klos is leading his team in yellow cards together with Nathan de Medina. So yeah, it's going to be, especially if it's going to be a rainy day in Bielefeld with a muddy pitch, it's just going to be one of those games where I will be happy if it's another 2-0 and, in the end dubbed a boring match, because if this game turns out to be an exciting game, it's usually doesn't bode well for Dortmund. So yeah, I think the focus needs to be on the game against Bruges a little bit. And then, if Dortmund make it out of these two games in one piece, then obviously they host Bayern. So there is maybe a tiny fraction of a chance that they can, I don't know, scrape away a point or something. So, yeah, we'll see about that, Lars. But I think I'm just circling around here. So I might as well head to the predictions. And, we'll be back very soon with the preview for the Bruges game. So Lars, do me the honor and give me your predicted scoreline.
First, just quickly to not give the appearance that we don't know anything about Bielefeld and don't give, Ritsu Doan, Japanese playmaker, really good player, loaned from, I want to say, Feyenoord, some Dutch side. Definitely been a valuable addition for them. And also Marcel Hartl, usually playing like as a 8/10, also a really good player. So just two more names. And also the goalkeeper Ortega, he's really good with his feet. He was actually close to signing for Leverkusen a few months back, but decided to stay on with promoted Bielefeld. He's also just a fun player to watch if you like good goalkeepers who nobody knows. Anyway, as for a prediction, I think I'm going with that boring 2-0 win you said, because I would also very much take it whenever facing a promoted side away from home. I think for Dortmund, the record against promoted sides away from home isn't great over the last few years. And just as you said earlier, I think I always remember, bad juju at Darmstadt or whatever at the Böllenfalltor. I think the Bielefelder Alm isn't quite the same as the Böllenfalltor, obviously without fans, but still, dubbing any win away from home boring for Dortmund is definitely a positive, as you said.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Ritsu Doan obviously has 1 goal and 1 assist already to his name. And yeah, I did see him play well, but the problem is I've seen so little of Bielefeld that I do not have the confidence of making any statements really of who is good and who is bad. So yeah, I'm glad you could add a little bit more to the subject. And I will, in the theme of the boringness, I will also go with a 2-0 prediction. And now it's time to get out of here. So Lars, thank you for coming on, and please tell our listeners how to follow you on Twitter.
They can follow me at Lars Pollmann.
Very well. You can follow me at Stefan Busko, and you can follow all of us at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to read our written content, go to theyellowwall.net. If you want to contribute financially, sponsor an episode, etc., go to patreon.com/theyellowwall. You can subscribe to our show via YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, etc. And that is it for this week. We shall be back next time after the game against Bielefeld and just before the game against Bruges. So, yeah, basically double duty for us as well, but that's how we like it. And with that, as always, thank you for listening. Stay safe and goodbye.